Amen. I entitled the message today, The Preview. We've titled the series Coming into Easter, Up from the Grave, and we are going to talk about an empty grave in just a few weeks. And I love this story in John chapter 11 of a grave that gets emptied. And so I want to give you a little bit of background, and then, don't cringe, we are going to do the whole chapter 11 of John. So I think I can get it done in good time. But if you have it, you can get it out. If not, we will go through it in chunks, and we'll take it a chunk at a time, and I'll talk about it, and off we go. Here's what's happening in Jesus' life right now and ministry. In John 10, we find Jesus across the Jordan, and it says that he's hanging out where John the Baptist was baptizing people. And so the main part of his ministry has been elsewhere, and he's gone somewhere. Well, what happened? He was doing some teaching, and he was very clear. You know, earlier in John 10, my sheep know my voice, I'm a good shepherd. But he unveils his claim to be God, and it says in 10:31 that a bunch of people picked up stones and were going to stone him and kill him. Now, he has been performing all kinds of miracles. There's been all kinds of evidence. He is who he claims to be. But they say, we're not going to kill you because of the deeds you've been doing. We kind of quite like that. We're going to kill you because of your claim. It's blasphemy. And so in 10:39, it says that as they sought to arrest him, he escaped, and this is where he ended up. We picked the story up in John chapter 11. Let's read verses 1 to 16. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going to go there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking a rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So the first section I've titled this, you know me and my titles, I titled it The Call for Help. I don't know how many of you have ever had that bad news call from close friends. Over the years, I've had people I've loved and walked closely with, and they call, and you know right away there's something in their voice, right? It's that, this is serious. I've had calls where a close friend is like, hey, this is desperate. I need you. Bring your truck. No, sorry. Some of you got it. I need you. My life has fallen apart. We're in a desperate situation. You got to come. Jesus is quite a ways away. Life hasn't been going that smoothly. I would say when they're trying to arrest you and stone you, it's not a good crowd that you're working. And he's away with the disciples, but the word comes that his close friends have an issue. Now, John is really clear about who we're talking about. You find Mary and Martha in other places in Scripture, and in verse 2, he even mentions something that, if you read his gospel chronologically, hasn't even happened yet. But he knows when they read this, they're going to identify who Mary was that washed Jesus' feet with her hair. And it's obviously a dire situation. They know that they're going to put their friend at risk, and they're saying, hey, you're the only one that can help. I would say it's the last chance, right? And the description in verse 5 says this: Jesus loved these three, a brother and two sisters. He loved them. And so it's puzzling to me, his response. He gets the word, and you would think you would pack up and go as quickly as possible. Try and get there. I know that's how I would have responded. And Jesus stays exactly where he was for 2 full days. A 2-day delay. Obviously, he knew what was going to happen. In talking to the disciples, he said he's dead. He knew what they were going to go through, but the delay is going on. And he makes this proclamation, which is incredibly interesting. He says, hey, there's 2 things that are a bigger purpose in all of this than me being there instantly. Number 1, that God's going to get the glory. That he's going to do something beyond what we could ask, think, or imagine. I've healed the blind man, and I've healed different people and cast out different things, and you've seen me do all of this, but this is going to be something where God's glory is going to be revealed in an even bigger way. And it's for the purpose of the growth of all that see it and the increase in their belief. Well, the disciples are quite clear, like, are we sure we want to go back there? There's a very real threat. And Jesus uses this term about walking in the light and going in daylight. And we don't need to go too far into it. If you want to study it, you can. It's quite interesting. They would refer to a 12-hour period of night and of day. And he's just making this clear observation that when I'm doing the right things, I can see where I'm going and I'm not going to stumble and fall. And so, yeah, there's 12 hours. Let's go. And the disciples' response to me, I should sit for this because I just found this kind of funny. They're like, oh, he's asleep? Great, he'll be fine. We don't have to go anywhere. It's like, you guys are not clued in, are you? Jesus is like, nope, he's dead. Now, just put yourself in the situation for a minute. He's already said this is the illness that's not going to lead to death, and you wonder if that message went back with whoever brought the message to him. But he's just told them the very thing they didn't think was going to happen. Nope, he's dead. And just in case any of you, the only story about Thomas you ever hear is when he has a bit of doubt, and Jesus, we call him Doubting Thomas. Look at the guy's courage here. Because he said, right, saddle up, let's go. Knowing full well that maybe they'll be going to die as well. But the close friend called. Jesus is going to respond. Let's go on in the story, beginning at verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give to you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. And when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, The teacher is here, and he's calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See, he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? I don't know about you, but I love to sit and imagine the scene and kind of put myself in it. I don't know if this translates across cultures, but in my version, Mennonites would bring food. Yeah? I mean, think about the food that would be at this, at the house. And they've come on the fourth day. So one of the commentators is telling me, as I read it, that one of the customs was when you had a tomb like that with a stone, the body would be laid to rest for 3 days, and they would call from the outside of the tomb. Some would move the stone and call on the third day. I don't know if they want, maybe somebody wasn't dead. I don't know. But it was part of the tradition. But on the fourth day, then, everybody would start gathering to grieve and to weep together. And there'd be a period of time in their culture that would happen, the family, the friends. So it's only 2 miles from Jerusalem. There's a huge contingent of people there. They've all come to console their friend. It seems like these are pretty prominent people, and when the alabaster jar is broken and the cost of all that, you're making an assumption that they're actually probably pretty well off. They even own a tomb that you can put a stone in front of. And it's this great picture of the family grieving as a group and coming together. And so you can't get away from the meeting with Mary and Martha. I don't know how Jesus sneaks word in. Probably not a text. But in a modern day version, she gets a text where he's like, I'm just out of town. I'm almost here. Now, there is an arrest warrant out for him. They are hunting him. And so she slides off to meet with Jesus and eventually gets her sister, and she comes as well. It's interesting that both of them had a strong belief. They both said this, I know you could have done it. You were able. And they both had an individual conversation with Jesus where he gave them his full attention in the middle of their pain. But don't miss, they both asked him the same question. Where were you? My reality would have been completely different if you'd have been here to stop this. You are allowing distress in my life. Ever ask that question? Why am I going through this? Why is this happening? What are you up to? I totally believe you can. What I'm struggling with is why you haven't. What's going on? Don't miss that Jesus doesn't start with answers, he starts with his presence. As he encounters a group of people who are distressed and in sorrow, he doesn't go, just give them 5. Wait, I'm going to do something that'll blow them away. You see him enter into their grief and their distress. In verses 33 and verses 35, it talks about Jesus being deeply troubled and deeply moved. There's all sorts of speculation about why. Is it because they didn't trust him or didn't get what he was doing, or is it because he just empathized with them? I personally, again, when I'm on the stool, don't build your theology on it. I think that Jesus loved them. And he saw their distress, and he empathized, and he wept with them. And he allowed himself to be distressed and to feel that, right? He shares this struggle, this pain. And I don't want you to just skip through the story and miss that Jesus is very present in this. Even when in verse 37 they go, hey, didn't he heal a blind guy? Surely he could have stopped this outcome. But Jesus saw beyond what they saw. This situation, he said right off the hop, was going to give God the glory and give growth and rise of belief in the people who experience it. And so in his response to Mary and Martha, this is what I don't want you to miss. This promise he gives them. I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. Yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And then he puts it back to them. Do you believe this? Well, let's read on. Let's go right down to verse 44 from verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. The miracle. Jesus wanders over to the grave, and he's just really clear in his communication. He tells them to start doing things that at the end of the story make perfect sense, but make no sense right now. Right? I can tell this story. I didn't ask you, but I'm gonna. Well, that was a look. If I'm missing tomorrow, no, just kidding. No, when Kareem was little, one of her siblings had a hamster or gerbil or something that died, and they had a little funeral for it and buried it in the yard. And the sister was really curious what it would look like and dug it up to have a look at it, but said to everybody, "Don't worry, I left it with its tail sticking out so I can find it again next time." That makes no sense. Roll the stone away. It's going to smell. This makes no sense. And Jesus said, didn't I tell you? Like, take me at my word. I promised you something. And it's not going to be what perhaps your life experience or science says is possible. This is a God thing. And then he prays. And he says, God, I already know what you're up to here. I know what you're going to do. I know that you've heard me. But I want to be really clear with all of these witnesses that this is you. That there can be no explaining it away. That there can be no, well, maybe this, maybe that. There's some theories. And the desired response, he says right out loud, I want them to believe that you sent me, and I am who I say I am. Why? Because this is the preview of what Jesus is going to do on your part and on mine. And we get to the unbinding of his buddy. Let him go. Get that stuff off of him. And I would imagine, I don't know if there's hugs or not. He might have smelled. I don't know. But I know this, that this particular miracle and resurrection was somewhat temporary. In fact, I'm extremely confident that at some point in life, maybe old age, maybe not, death came for Lazarus, right? But he knew Jesus. And he was alive with him. I also know that this complicated his life because I read ahead. And if you want to skip into chapter 12, verses 9 to 11, you've got the brainiacs that be, the guys in power, and they make an observation that everybody on their way to Jerusalem is swinging through to meet Lazarus. I don't know if they ding-dong ditched his door and said, hey, come on out, let's have a look at you. Right? That's him. I saw the guy, right? Maybe they had T-shirts made. I saw Lazarus. I don't know. Okay, tunics made. Go with your thing. I get to have a little creative license here. But it says they decided to kill Lazarus as well as Jesus because they couldn't let this demonstration of the glory of God, this miracle, this witness, continue to give people question. Interesting. Well, let's finish our passage. Beginning at verse 45, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some, and there's always some, you guys all know who you are, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. He didn't say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Therefore, Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim. And there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand. And many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he won't come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so they might arrest him. A super interesting passage to finish it off. John puts all this detail in that I think is amazing. But he starts with this: there were many who believed. They witnessed the truth. Next week we'll talk about them. They're probably laying down their cloaks in the palm branches and shouting Hosanna, because Jesus is going to swing through there on his triumphal entry, his way into Jerusalem for that final week. It says many of them turned to their spiritual leaders. You see, God did something they didn't have a bucket for, right? These signs, these wonders were prophesied about and predicted, but what do we do with this? And so as they go to their spiritual leaders, I'm asking two questions. Are some saying, "Help us understand. This doesn't fit my paradigm. This doesn't fit my ideology. This doesn't fit what I've... Help me get it." Don't know. Or were some just plain old tattletales? "Hey, I found him. Come get him." I don't know. But there was definitely two responses to seeing that miracle, seeing that work of God. One was to believe, and one was to try and find a way to reason it or question it. Well, the response of the leaders is equally as interesting. What are we to do? I mean, this guy's performing all the signs. He's checking all the boxes. If this goes forward, we're going to lose our place with Rome. The temple won't be important anymore. We're going to lose our power. And this chief priest has this prophecy that says that Jesus needs to die so that all of this will happen, not understanding what God's doing. He's talking about the Gentiles, and he's talking about the forgiveness of sin, and that there's an opportunity to be reconciled with God. He just seems to think if they take and kill Jesus, these things that he prophesied about will happen. Knowing what they said about Lazarus and knowing how they're going after Jesus, here's what they rationalized. It's better that we do something that we're technically forbidden to do, that the Big Ten holds us from, that we shouldn't get away with. For the sake of the many, the ends justify the means. He's got to die. And Jesus withdraws until the triumphal entry. And John gives us this little tidbit. The people were wondering if they were going to see him. Curiosity. So that's a big question. So what? I love stories in John. I mean, this account of what happened. It's awesome. What does that mean for you sitting here today? What do you carry out of here? First, in the same way that Jesus was deeply, deeply committed to and affected by those three, it repeatedly said he loved them, longed to be with them. Don't miss this truth if you're sitting here this morning. You are deeply loved by God. I don't know if your circumstances or situation isn't what you imagined it would be. I'm not sure where you're disappointed or where your questions are today. But you can begin to believe like if you'd have just, and forget that first and foremost, you are deeply loved. And it says that God loved the whole world so much that he sent his own son, right? And you that have responded to that and believe, you've got the promises of God to hang on to, even when it doesn't look in any way in your life like he's coming through in that. He says, do you believe? See, the hard truth this morning, just so we don't lie to each other, is we're all going to have crisis moments where we come to the end of ourselves and we send for Jesus. We ask that question, where are you in this? We say, I know you could change this, but you're not. Don't miss this. Jesus repeats who he is and their belief in him. He repeats the promise, right? If that's your situation today, and when you get to that situation, predetermine when the crisis comes. I'm going to stand on who he says he is and what he's promised me. And I'm not going to listen to that little whisper that keeps asking this question, don't you care? Because he's promised he does. Now, here's another sad truth. We never dictate the timing or response of God. Wouldn't it be great if there was a formula, just like putting something in the slot machine, pulling the handle and you win every time, or if there was a way that you could just know you had an instantaneous response or solution to whatever it is you're going through? Anybody else want that? I do. If any of you figured out how to manipulate that, let me know. But it can't be. They sent the messenger. Jesus intentionally waited. We can't get around that. Because he was up to something. He was really clear. I want this to be to the glory of God, and I want it to cause growth and belief in people. And so it's going to happen this way because I'm doing something bigger and wider. He's up to more than we know, but we don't dictate the timing or response. He gives us some promises to lean on. And I've got to tell you, probably most impactful is Jesus' willingness to enter into their sorrows and to grieve with them and be disturbed with them. Man, wherever you find yourself today, you have a Heavenly Father who empathizes and cares, and you might go, no, Pastor, I made this mess. You don't get it. No, Pastor, I'm suffering the results of my bad choices. These are the consequences. Jesus doesn't want any part of that. He's just letting me stew in it. No, not true. All things, even the mistakes and the consequences, can work together for the good, towards the glory of God if they are offered to him. And he meets us right where we are. You don't have to get cleaned up. You don't have to come to. He will meet you right where you are, right in what you're in. And then he reminds them of this unbelievable truth, this truth that we come to Easter and remember. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe that? You see, it's a question we all have to answer. If you're here this morning and you've never answered that question, here's a great little verse. Talk to us later. In Romans 10, it says this: because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. As you prepare for Easter, you got to keep asking that question, do you believe? Am I willing to allow the presence of Jesus into my situation, and then am I going to lean into and stand on the promise? Last thing to take away. Don't be surprised by the enemy. Okay? The enemy's going to respond. He's trying to take away what God's doing. Poor old Lazarus, man. I died once. I'm finally back out. Now I'm a star, and they're going to kill me again. Yeah. Because you were a living witness of the radical transformation of the work of God. You're this preview to what's coming. as all of us give our hearts to Christ, as the stone is made alive, as he gives us new life, as he works in and through us, and we become his witness, and we begin to partner with him in our work, don't be surprised at a response that brings attack or an enemy that tries to destroy. Let me pray.